Welcome back to another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm your host, Stephen Roy Goodman. I'm here at Hood College in Maryland, where we're going to be speaking about facilities management, facilities planning, and planning in general. And I'm here with Chuck Mann, who's one of the vice presidents here at Hood. And so Chuck, welcome.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Well, thanks for coming on. Chuck, I guess if we can start with facilities management. This is an old campus. You've got to deal with issues of making sure that buildings are accessible and clean and safe, but also dealing with what you've got. How do you manage that?
Well, deferred maintenance in a small college like this, an older small college at that, is a big issue. There's a tremendous amount of deferred maintenance. We try to stay ahead of it as best we can, but old buildings do require a lot of work. The way we handle it is we budget in our process for deferred maintenance. That non-cash item frees up money then that allows us to then contribute to restoring the buildings and addressing that deferred maintenance. So we have a funding mechanism in place, and we have a process then in terms of what projects need to be done over a multi-year period, and then we just kind of go through those projects and knock them off as we can.
And do students have any input into that?
In the deferred maintenance, no, because that's pretty much just normal work that has to be done to keep the buildings usable overall. We do have a campus master plan, which comes off of the strategic plan, and when we went through that process, yes, we had tremendous student input in the process. The students provide us guidance as to how they saw the campus, what they would like to see, and how they saw the future direction of the campus going. And so we incorporated their input into our 10-year campus master plan.
And what were some of those things that students said that you were a little surprised about?
I wouldn't say surprised. They were concerned about the student union and having a nice facility there. The dormitories were another area. We have very old traditional dorms in general. We have 5 dormitories that were constructed in the days of 2 students in a room with a shared bathroom down the hall, and that's not what most students like today. And so we're in the process of building a new residence hall, which came from that campus master planning and the student input. But I would say the students really, that was their major areas of concern, were the residence halls and the student life area.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because as you well know, many universities and colleges, or some people say are in an arms race to make nicer and nicer dorms because that's what students and families want.
Correct. And you have to balance that, obviously. We need to recruit students. That's our livelihood, is to have the students on this campus. It's our mission. And so we have to continually look at using our resources in a way that will help attract those students and give them what they want without going overboard to, as you call it, the arms race. So we're building a new residence hall, but it doesn't have any of the features that you might hear about in some of the schools, like climbing walls or things of that sort. It's a more suite and semi-suite basis, so students have private bathrooms, which is what they really like. And it's going to be a nice facility with a nice lounges, but nothing overboard in terms of an arms race.
Well, and speaking of the private bathrooms, in the era of the coronavirus, issues of cleanliness and bathrooms become very important. I assume that you've done some planning around this.
We've done tremendous amount of planning. We started well back in May, really with an architectural firm who helped us look at the classrooms to begin with, and how would we provide the social distancing in the classrooms. And so they came up with a model that we then have replicated and have spent most of our summer going around and outfitting our classrooms, removing a lot of furniture, making sure the 6-foot distance between chairs. We have an 8-foot walk area at the front of the classroom for the faculty member, and then we have a 4-foot walk area for in and out of the classroom, so that the students, again, can maintain the social distance as they move around. We've done the same thing in our science labs, our computer labs, our lounges. We've also gone through the bathrooms and changed those out so that we have proper distance in those restrooms. The residence halls are much more of a challenge, again, trying to accommodate the needs of the students and the number of students in there. And we've also put up a tremendous amount of signage on campus. So we're controlling a door in, a door out, stairs, which stairs are up, which stairs are down. Again, all with the intent of trying to ensure the social distancing.
But how do you think that's going to affect interaction, student interactions?
I don't think it's going to change too much in terms of their interaction. We'll have fewer students in each classroom, and so that's going to change the number of students that can physically be in the classroom, and therefore the interactions in that way. But the students will still be there. They'll be 6 feet apart. I think it will change in some ways the way the faculty and how some of them like to teach. In other words, I know some faculty sometimes like to put the students in a circle and have a conversation. And so everybody has the eyesight to one another. That's going to be much more difficult while maintaining the 6-foot distance between the students. So there'll be some changes that faculty will have to go through from maybe the pedagogy that they like to have used in the past to how they're going to have to use the classroom today.
Well, and that really gets to the issue then of also, the kind of teaching in the future. As you well know, there have been all these discussions in American higher education about the future of American higher education. So do you see facilities adapting in some way to some of those changes?
I think facilities have continually changed in that direction. Our classrooms today are much more high-tech than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. Even in view of the coronavirus, we've added even more technology to the classrooms because, again, we anticipate that while some students will come to class physically, some students will not be able to come to class and will still want to participate in the class. So we've had to add more technology to all of our classrooms. Every classroom now has a camera, has the ability to basically provide remote education so that the students can feel like they're participating in the class even though they may not be physically in the class at the time. So technology has changed the classrooms a lot, and I think it will continue to change that.
But as you well know, that technology costs a lot of money.
It does.
And who's bearing the burden of that technology?
The college does. I mean, that's part of the cost of providing the education to the students. So as I mentioned before when I talked about deferred maintenance, some of that money goes into providing the technology in these classrooms. And that is a major piece. I mean, obviously, Wi-Fi alone in today's world continues just to grow and grow, and that requires a lot more technology to provide the bandwidth that's needed for that. So one of the things that we've seen is that becomes an area that it seems like you can't completely satisfy. Students are bringing multiple devices to campus these days, cell phones, iPads, laptop computers. They may have all 3 of them with them in a class at one time. And of course, all 3 of them are connecting to the Wi-Fi. You take that and you compound that with every student, it becomes quite an amount of bandwidth that's required. Now we're going to provide this remote educational opportunity, which adds another level of bandwidth to it. So you figure every class that's going on at any given time is now also being broadcast through the internet, also requires a tremendous amount of bandwidth.
Yeah, and speaking of the bandwidth, can we talk about the bandwidth of Frederick, the city? So how do you interact with the city? Can a resident audit a class here?
Yes, we have a couple of programs. We have auditing of classes. We also have an opportunity for people who are retired to come back and take classes at a much more reduced rate. Hood's is very fortunate. We have a great relationship with the city of Frederick and the citizens in the county. We're considered a great resource to them, and we consider them a great resource to us. Our well-being is directly connected to Frederick's well-being, and to some degree, Frederick's well-being is connected directly to our well-being.
Well, if we can move to the issue of, back to the facilities per se. So if you take an old room like this one, can anyone have access to this room? Can a student just walk in here at midnight and say, I feel like studying in this beautiful old room?
Some areas, yes, and some areas, no. All our buildings are generally open up until a certain time at night, and then we lock the buildings at night. So that the students then wouldn't have access like 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning type thing. Up until then, they can use these rooms. We do have a system for people to reserve rooms for meetings, and the students will use that as well. It's not uncommon in this room, for example, for the student government's executive group, their executive branch, to meet weekly in this room. And so at night, they normally meet about 9 o'clock at night, which is when students like to have their meetings, well after I'm gone to bed, and they typically will use this room for those type of meetings. So in general, as a small college, we try to make our facilities open to our students on a fairly regular basis.
And if the room isn't open at the middle of the night, where can students get together if they want to study, let's say at 2 in the morning?
Well, we have our student union is open 24 hours a day. The residence halls have multiple areas for students to study in those areas. And then we also have our library is going through a renovation currently. We're converting it to a learning commons, and the intent will be that that building will be open 24 hours as well. And so there'll be study areas for the students in that building.
How would you extrapolate out to bigger schools? Maybe you could explain this a little bit. I believe you have about 30 or 40 buildings on campus. Now that's a lot different than a larger state university, but in terms of those 30 buildings, is there kind of a manager of each building?
No, we don't have a manager for each building. Our facilities department oversees all the buildings. Everybody on campus has access through the web to put in work orders, and we depend upon the eyes of everybody on campus to help us. We feel that that's the best way of ensuring that things get addressed. And especially risk issues. No one individual can see everything. So our hope is that everybody on campus is looking and identifying things that need to be fixed, and then they go into the web, put in their work order, and then facilities manages those and make sure that the work gets done.
And a student could do that too?
Yes. As a matter of fact, the students are encouraged to do it, especially in the dormitories. So if they have a problem in their room, they're encouraged to go to the web and put in their work order so that we can address it.
And then what about people who are visitors to the campus? If we can get to that a little bit more. So let's say they want to use the gym. How do they do that?
We have a conference planning office. Individuals who want to use our facilities work through there. We have a contract. There's a price, obviously, for use of that. And if the dates are available and it fits within our institutional missions and goals, we'll allow those spaces to be used for that. And we do quite a bit of that. Throughout the year, we have a lot of people that use the campus for various conferences and meetings. They're part of the Frederick community. And then in the summertime, we do a lot with camps and conferences. Both sports camps as well as academic camps, and then just third parties that want to have their conferences on campus.
And what about if somebody does something that they shouldn't do, like smoke in a building when they shouldn't smoke in a building, or be in a room after they should be?
Basically, we've not had too much problem with that, but our campus safety officers will take care of it.
So it really isn't something that has been a big issue. I imagine this has been an issue, though, at a lot of campuses, though.
Not that, we've not had that much of a problem with it. If someone does, campus safety's called and campus safety takes care of it, and it's never been a real issue. Obviously, as we get into COVID and the students returning for that, and especially the requiring a mask, I think that's going to be of an interest in terms of making sure students follow those requirements and visitors on campus follow those requirements. But we've laid down a very strict policy that if you don't wear your mask when you're on campus, then you'll be asked to leave the campus. And that includes employees, students, as well as visitors.
And are you expecting professors to wear a mask while they're teaching?
Correct. Faculty members will be required to wear a mask while they're teaching, and the students in the classroom will be required to wear a mask while they're in class.
And how about small group discussions afterwards?
Same thing. We're going to ask, we're looking at, we want students to maintain the social distance, but also wear a mask. Social distance, masking, and hygiene are the three things that we're really putting a lot of emphasis on.
And in terms of the hygiene, so how are you going to do that exactly if you've got these very old bathrooms in certain places?
Well, we've blocked off components, sinks, toilets, so that we maintain the social distance in the bathrooms. Our facilities department is going to go through and every day do what they call a deep cleaning of every space on campus. And then throughout the day, they're going to touch every space with additional cleaning 3 times a day. So every space will have the deep cleaning and then 3 times touched throughout the entire day.
Which sounds terrific.
Yes.
But I wonder if that's actually going to happen at so many colleges and universities.
I think most schools are trying to do things of that sort, and obviously a smaller school maybe has a little bit of advantage because we don't have as many spaces. But it is a costly aspect too. I mean, we're hiring more custodial workers, more cleaning supplies. This is a costly endeavor, but it's also important for the safety of everybody on campus.
And I suspect that's so. If I can ask you to compare this to where you went to school, to Texas Christian, which is a very, very large school. So how could a school like Texas Christian hope to clean every space every night at Texas Christian?
I think they're going to. I mean, I can't speak for those other schools. But from what I've read and what I've seen, it seems like most schools are making the effort that they're going to do that. There's a lot of new technologies out there. The sprays that help get through spaces faster, so you don't have to hand wipe every space. You can use these sprays. So I think schools are looking at different types of technology to allow them to get through those spaces faster.
And then in terms of the library, how's the library going to work?
The building will be finished in November. We've changed our academic calendar to kind of assist through the COVID process. So we're starting a week earlier this year, and we will end at Thanksgiving. So the new library will be completing just about when the semester ends. So we'll really open the library in January. During the fall, what will happen is our library staff will still have access to the library to retrieve books for students and to restock the shelves as they need to. We've set up a place in the student union where students can come and request books. And then at the end of the day, when the construction work is completed, so we're not mixing our people with the construction workers, what's going to happen is our library staff will go into the building when nobody else is there, retrieve the books that they need for the students, and then the students can come to the student union and pick those books up.
Which all sounds like a great plan. I guess as you were saying that, I was kind of thinking about this controversy recently about the existential crisis of American higher education, particularly for small schools. It sounds, for someone in the education world, high touch, individual attention is terrific, but somehow that's not necessarily translating to the general public. How do we as a sector deal with issues of people focusing on the larger schools, not necessarily the smaller schools?
I'm a tremendous advocate. I spent my entire career in liberal arts colleges, and I have a tremendous belief in those schools. The quality that I think you get from the more personal attention you get with a faculty member in a small liberal arts college is invaluable. Our faculty are fantastic. My daughter is a graduate of Hood, came here after I started working here. I have 3 children. My other 2 sons went to other schools. I think she's got one of the best educations of the 3 of them, and it's because of that interaction that she can have with the faculty members. She got to know her faculty members. They gave her opportunities. They got her into conferences. It really gave her a tremendous opportunities that then allowed her to quickly get a job when she graduated. So I think the small colleges have a tremendous amount to offer in terms of that personal touch. And that's what we pride ourselves in, and I think we do an excellent job of it here at Hood College.
Well, let's assume all that's true, but how does that translate to the marketplace?
I think it translates well. I mean, that is the piece that we try to recruit students on. Cost is always a factor, and obviously the personal touch comes with a higher cost. To a part of your conversation about the facilities, I think in higher education, especially for small private colleges, our cost factors are labor costs because we're labor intensive, and our facilities costs, the deferred maintenance that's associated with that. Those 2 things are expensive. A physical plant and a labor-intensive environment are very, very expensive, and that's what causes tuition rates to be higher, especially for private institutions. And that is where I think the average individual, the average consumer, has a difficult time is they see these high price tag, and they don't realize that how much of that's the labor of giving this quality education that they're getting.
Could you put an estimate on that? What percentage between the deferred maintenance and the labor do you think goes into your budget?
Labor is by far the most. It's about 70% of our budget's labor. The other 30% is everything from supplies and equipment to some of the deferred maintenance that's in there.
And do you have an endowment?
We do. And the endowment is very helpful in both the supporting of our labor cost as well as some of our facilities cost. But the largest component of our endowment, rightfully so, goes to scholarships. And that's what makes the college affordable to our students. It is a higher price tag, but in the end, we give a tremendous discount. And we do that because we have this endowed scholarships that help the students with their tuition. And therefore, we can get our tuition down more comparably to the the public institutions.
So for instance, would you use any of the endowment to pay for the library that's soon to be open?
We have not used the endowment for that. We have done a capital campaign to help fund that. So the library is funded that way. The hood uses, as most institutions do, there'll be either capital funds that are raised for a new building or construction renovation of a building, debt, which is what we're doing on our residence hall, and then our deferred maintenance fund, which we also use for renovation projects. So those are our three primary funding sources for our facilities.
And this might sound like a little bit of an inside baseball question, but let's say somebody was in a graduate school of education and they wanted to have your job. What should they be doing now? What courses should they be taking? What should they do to prepare for a career in university management, particularly as it might relate to facilities management as a component?
Obviously, business courses. I would say take a lot of courses in accounting, take a lot of courses in economics, take a lot of courses in finance. If you have an opportunity to learn about project management, that's a major component of the job. Those, I think, are the biggest pieces that a student needs to learn in order to do this job down the line, because it encompasses all those. It's managing the endowment, which is the financial aspect of it, and the billing, the entire operation, the budgeting of the college, things of that sort. Economics, tremendous impact, obviously, as to how it impacts higher education as a whole and our industry overall. And in the accounting, if you got to be able to read financial statements, you got to be able to understand that aspect of it, so you understand where the dollars are going at the institution. And then obviously a big part of it is project management, because we have to manage all these projects that are taking place. A lot of it, obviously you're hiring contractors, but you got to keep them on task. You have to have a good way of organizing that. Even as we've done the COVID preparations over the summer, you use project management. You put together a schedule, put together a task list of who needs to do what, list all the tasks, what's dependent upon one another, and then have everybody start working on it. And so you have to kind of manage those projects in those ways.
So in some ways, you're almost a homeowner.
I would say you're almost more of the mayor of a city in a lot of ways. To manage a college is pretty much managing a city. We have almost all the facilities. We have hotels in the sense of residence halls. We have food service, which is equivalent of a restaurant. We have a variety of buildings and campus facilities, outside landscaping. I mean, we have the whole thing. It's very much similar. Presidents of colleges, I think, are very similar to mayors of cities in many ways.
Well, I think we only have a few minutes left. Is there something about facilities management that I haven't asked you that you might think is important to share with the higher education today audience?
Just as you've touched on it, but it's an always evolving process. And the balancing, especially of budgets, and especially for a small college, balancing those budgets with the needs of the institution. And those needs are everything from the deferred maintenance to the changing programmatic needs. And how do we fit those into our overall plan? So as faculty change, as institutions change in terms of how they deliver, how our programs are changing, we add a nursing program, well, that requires some new labs and some new equipment, those type of things. As those things change, it's a continually evolving of facilities. And so it's a continually adapting situation.
And I guess my follow-up to that, if I may, is the issue of the adaptation. Because I think you're right that the higher education sector is evolving as a society. So what faculty want, what students want, what administrators want aren't always the same, and they change over time.
That's very true. Trying to find the common ground for everybody is a difficult aspect of the process, because everybody does have, you have limited dollars, and you can only spend them once. And where a student would like to see you spend your dollars might be very different than where a faculty member wants to see you spend your dollars. And so trying to work through those issues can be very tricky. It takes we try to have a very inclusive budgeting process. We have a committee called the Planning, Budget, and Assessment Committee that I chair, and that committee reviews all these types of programmatic decisions in terms of where's the money going to go, how are we going to allocate our scarce resources in the best way possible.
Well, Chuck, thank you so much. This has been very helpful.
Thank you very much, Steve. Enjoyed it.
If you would like additional information about Hood, please visit hood.edu. If you would like to send a note to me at the show, please go ahead and do so at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. And thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. I'm Stephen Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.